Welcome all. Welcome all. It is a matter of great pleasure to unfold my heart in front of you. As it is known to us, it is day two, and henceforth it is the turn of Department of English. And we have organized this webinar for the sake of the participants and to boost up knowledge as well as to know the trajectory to go beyond patriarchy. So, in this COVID 19 situation, which is definitely a severe pandemic, we are trying our best to organize these kinds of webinars for the refreshment of our participants as well as for getting knowledge. So, I would like to thank all the participants, those who have registered themselves, and I would also like to thank my learned colleagues of Department of English and thereafter our coordinator of IQCCL, respected Professor Rajoshi Mukherjee sir. And Principal sir, who is constantly supporting us, I would like to also thank him. I would also like to thank our two eminent speakers, Professor Anuradha Vasu and Dr. Shati Mukherjee Madam. Now, as you all know that the title of today's webinar, that is Text and Context, Women's Scrutiny. So this is definitely a serious issue. And in this contemporary society, it has a special relevance. Now, when the term that connects women oppression, that is actually connected to the patriarchal norms which are deep rooted in our society. And today, definitely, these aspects will be illuminated by our two eminent speakers. Today, two texts have been selected which will be illuminated. Firstly, our first speaker, Anuradha Madam, will illuminate Draupadi, written by Mahashika Devi, and our second speaker will illuminate The Color Purple, written by Alice Olinka. So, in respective of concept note, if I just tell something that if I consider the character of Amba, as for example, taking a character from Mahabharata, then we will see that her character is full of defiance. How? Because when she returned or went to King Shalluraj, then King Shallu refused her because she was abducted by Vishnu. And thereafter, she released the fountain of poison. So her defense is inside. So I am giving an example from Mahabharata because the context of Draupadi is connected to Mahabharata. And later, from Mahabharata, if I turn to the characterization of Shakespeare, that means I am talking about Elizabethan age, then we have found the character of Lady Macbeth. Now, Lady Macbeth is a character who is demanding masculine attributes, characteristics. And as she is demanding masculine characteristics, the famous quotation, unsex me here, it actually denotes that masculinity that that is more or less connected to heinous crimes or that kind of inspiration that was felt by Shakespeare also. So this is the connection. And from Elizabethan to the Victorian, if I move forward, if I take another male character, as for example, the character of the Duke of Ferrara. The Duke of Ferrara, this is the character of My Last Duchess. My Last Duchess is a poem written by one of the finest Victorian poets, Robert Browning. Now, in his character, that means in the character of the Duke, there is this kind of oppressive attitude, and that is why he takes pride and says that I give command, and then all smiles stop together. So even the smiles of the feminine gender or the females, those are snatched by the patriarchal society. So from that part, Victorian period, if I come into the context of Draupadi, which is written by Mahashika Devi and translated by Gayatri Chakraborty's Spivak, then it is very interesting to say that she is also the character of defiance. How? Because she is showing her defiance in front of in front of Shenanayaka. How? Ripping off the clothes and moving forward to him. At the same time, there is a famous quotation that is, pubic hairs matted with dry blood. So we can realize the pain here. We can realize the atrocity, the rapes, different types of operations. Those are being constantly committed in our society. So this kind of burning issues we have tried our best to illuminate in this webinar. And in the second session, there will be another topic, that is the color purple, where silly or netty, those are these two characters, and the other characters, female characters, are also similarly oppressed. But at last, they have found the way to get beyond patriarchy by their defiance. So it may be defiance, it may be resistance, it may be silence, but anyhow, women, they have managed to find the outlet to get beyond patriarchy. It is very important. So this kind of tamacha, that is a Hindu word, a slap, which has been given to the male-dominated society, and they have established themselves in our society. They have equal right, definitely. So these are very interesting two topics, those we have chosen, and these will be illuminated by our two eminent speakers. So if I consider the context of feminist writing, it is very interesting and it is so widespread. If I consider the case of Beryl Stonecraft's vindication of the rights of women, thereafter Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, or Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. So there are multiple examples, feminist writings, where they have found the outlet, the way, the trajectory to defend themselves and to express themselves. At the same time, there are many observations, and I would like to illuminate one of such observation which has been made by Colette Guillemin. What did she say? In her observation, she found that even the hair and milk of the woman, everything is sold by the male members of the family. So this kind of oppression that is also running on in different types of cultures. And as you all know that culture that actually rise to gives rise to the gender. It is known to us that culture that gives rise to gender and gender that gives rise to inequality. How? It is very interesting to say that this sex is biological and equal, while as gender is cultural programming. And that is why in culture there is inequality, because inside culture, the dominance can be applied by the male members. So this is very interesting, and the term from different types of ways are there, and in many cultures they are seen like animals, creatures. But this time has gone from creatures to the movement to a creature feminine, as mentioned by Julia Kristeva. So a creature feminine, which is a fantastic meta, because it is actually the writing of the women, or women speak. And henceforth, today we have organized this kind of a webinar where all these things will be illuminated, all these aspects will be illuminated. Serious issue. So we have learned a lot, but one thing that is very important, that we must have to pay importance, must have to pay value to them, to women, because it is a must, and must is must. It cannot be circumscribed in the books or in the webinars or in the lectures. It has a huge dimension. It has a huge learning. It has a huge field to realize. The realization is necessary. We must have to pay respect our mothers and sisters. And if this realization does not occur, we will definitely not able to make equilibrium. They will be just written inside the books. So bookish knowledge is of little use in that sense. The ultimate fact is to realize the reality, because it is the time that one day everybody will feel the same. Now, I will not make my speech lengthy, because we have two eminent speakers and time is short. Whatever be the case, we will learn many things from this webinar. And right now, I would like to request our operators to play the video of our principal sir, who has sent us welcome note, because he is not present with us, but his well wishes as well as his endeavor, encouragement, those are always present with us. I'd like to play on the video of our respected principal sir, Dr. S.K. Bose. Please.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I welcome all the participants in the 5 days international webinar series on gender studies, multidisciplinary perspectives, and today's sub-theme is texts and contexts, a feminist scrutiny, being organized by the Department of English in association with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of our college. I would like to convey thanks to the honorable speakers of this webinar, Anuradha Basu, Associate Professor in English, Victoria Institution, Kolkata, and Dr. Swati Mukherjee, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Gurudas College, Kolkata. I would also like to convey thanks to the coordinator and members of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, along with the teachers of the Department of English of our college, who deserve it for arranging such a webinar in this time of pandemic. I think the participants will be benefited from this webinar. I expect a grand success of this webinar. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, respected Principal Sir. I would also like to thank our technical support members, technical team, for their constant support. And right now it is the turn to request our IQAC representative. He is none but Assistant Professor of Zoology Department, Prosenjit Da. Respected Prosenjit sir, please.
Thank you, Prashanjit. Uh, okay, yeah. Welcome everyone in the international webinar series on the gender studies, the multidisciplinary perspective. So we are having a series of lectures on this topic, and today's sub-theme is Text and Contest, a Feminist Scrutiny, organized by the Department of English in association with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Shampoo Siddheshwari Mahavidyalaya. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Rajoshi Mukherjee for offering me this chance to say something about today's webinar on behalf of IQAC. This webinar series is actually his brainchild, and I congratulate the whole organizing team for such a successful beginning of the program. For more than last 6 months now, we are detached from the conventional classroom teaching learning process. But the bright side is that we are exposed to a completely revolutionary shift towards online teaching learning process and online communication with our students and our fellow teachers. Even most of us are doing this for the first time also. So we are actually getting the chance to take part in a wide range of programs which is going on across the globe. And talking about the gender studies, I feel that we have to go a really long way. Most of the time, the gender discrimination is imprinted deep inside us, and we have to work really hard because most importantly, honestly, to overcome this era-old problem. Be it while deciding how a girl should behave, or how she should, what she should wear, or what she should do, or maybe how a boy should appear, or maybe our perspective towards the third gender people. So this job is going to be tough because we feel uncomfortable to break the stereotypes, and we often hesitate to challenge what is common or popular, though it may be wrong sometimes. So I welcome all the participants in today's webinar, and I hope you will enjoy. And I also request you to keep in mind that gender studies is not only a subject to be discussed in a webinar or to be taught, but it should be an oath for all of us that we will apply it in our daily life. We have to teach this to our kids and to our fellow friends, to our students, before everyone, ourselves. Okay, so that the difference remains only in biology, but not in the social life or any other aspect. Thank you. And I will request the organizers to go with the stipulated program and all. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Prosenjit sir, for your valuable speech. Now, from that part, we are moving to the core part, and it is the time to listen to our speakers and get mesmerized. But before this, I would like to request to come and appear our respected madam of our department, Shilpa Marik. Please come and introduce our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Professor Shorkar. A very good evening to all of our participants and dignitaries. This is our great pleasure to conduct this webinar on the topic Text and Context of Feminist Scrutiny. And today we have with us two special guests. And now we are pleased to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Anuradha Basu, Associate Professor in English, Victoria Institution College, Kolkata. She has undergraduate teaching experience of about 25 years. Her areas of interest are Renaissance, Elizabethan literature, post-colonial criticism, and post-colonial literature and African literature. In her career, she has had several publications in various journals of India and abroad. Some of her significant publications are post-colonial adaptations and appropriations in Chinua Achebe in International Journal of English and Literature, Post-Colonialism, Independence and Interdependence in the IUP Journal English Studies, Colonial Disruption and Reluctant Politics in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart and many others. And she herself has authored 5 books as Chinua Achebe's British Colonialism and the Igbores, The Politics of Equivocations in the Plays of Shakespeare, and Post-Colonial Theory of Interdependence and Reflections in the Novels of Chinua Achebe. And today her presentation is on tribal warfare and feminine challenge in Draupadi by Mahashika Devi. And now I officially welcome Professor Anuradha Basu in this webinar. Ma'am, the floor is yours. Please, ma'am.
Thank you. I must say I am really glad that I'm a part of this webinar today, and I must thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to speak on this huge forum. So, as you heard, my title today is Tribal Warfare and Feminine Challenge in Draupadi by Mahashika Devi. Mahashika Devi was born in January 1926 and died in July 2016. Says Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, the translator of Mahashika Devi's Draupadi and short story collections, other short story collections, that in her 50s, Mahashika Devi was a middle-class Bengali leftist intellectual. She had a master's degree in English from Shantiniketan, the experimental Vishwabharati University, set up by Rabindranath Tagore. Her reputation as a novelist was already well established when in the late 70s, she published Hajar Churashir Ma. This novel, says Spivak, was the only one eminently published novel in English translation that remains within the excessively sentimental idiom of the Bengali novel of the last 20-odd years. Hajar Churashir Ma, translated by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, was titled Number 1084's Mother. However, Spivak points out that in Oronner Odhikar, which she translated as The Rights of the Forest, a significant change is noticeable. It is a meticulously researched historical novel about the Munda insurrection of 1899-1900. Here, Mahashika Devi begins putting together a prose that is a collage of literary Bengali, street Bengali, bureaucratic Bengali, tribal Bengali, and the language of the tribals. It thus stands from Spivak's observations that Mahashika Devi was a famous, self-proclaimed social activist, writer, and journalist from India who worked hard for the growth of the tribal people. She was fondly called the mother of the Sabars because of her extensive work in support of the Sabar tribe. Mahashika Devi had written more than 100 novels and over 20 collections of short stories. The Indian government had honored her with various literary awards such as the Sahitya Academy Award, Gyanpith Award, and even the civilian awards of Padma Shri and Padma Vibhushan. The short story Draupadi first appeared in Agni Garbha, or Womb of Fire, a collection of loosely connected short political narratives. As Mahashika Devi points out in her introduction to the collection, life is not mathematics and the human being is not made for the sake of politics. I want a change in the present social system and do not believe in mere party politics. However, the translator Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak's approach to the short story Draupadi has been influenced by deconstructive practice. Spivak says on her theory of feminism about women, and I quote, "I speak of what I do as a woman within literary criticism. My own definition of a woman is very simple. It rests on the word man. Defining the word woman as resting on the word man is a reactionary position. Spivak feels one could go on deconstructing the opposition between man and woman and finally show that it is a binary opposition that displaces itself. It is this aspect that interests Spivak most. That is, and I quote, "the recognition within deconstructive practice of provisional and intractable starting points in any investigative effort, its disclosure of complicities where a will to knowledge would create oppositions, its insistence that in disclosing complicities, the critic as subject is herself complicit with the object of her critique." And I unquote. Thus, the figure of Senanayak can be read in the context of this pattern of complicity. The relationship between tribal and classical characters of Draupadi, the status of Draupadi at the end of the story, and the reading of Senanayak which means army chief. The Senanayak's proper name, and we know that in the short story, Senanayak has not been given a proper name, he is just designated as the Senanayak, and this may be seen as produced by the reading practice Spivak has described, that is, in the light of complicity and deconstructive placing of man and woman as opposites, through which a new definition of woman might emerge. That is, through the clash between and the reactionary oppositional conflict between man and woman, ultimately a woman might find her new identity. In this paper, I intend to argue that the figure of Draupadi, an apparently subjugated Santal woman, emerges as a figure of feminine challenge in the context of tribal warfare of Jharkhani forest. The Senanayak is the first world representative who must bring the third world tribal population under his control by practicing the art of complicity, just as Prospero in The Tempest had brought Caliban's island under his overlordship by practicing the art of complicity, that is, by projecting himself as the benevolent benefactor who would do good to the islanders by giving them a better life and freedom. You see, this art of complicity was a sort of understanding between between the government and the landowner, that the government would give certain benefits to the landowners, which would help to them to rule the areas better. And the landowners were supposed to distribute these benefits to the poor people, but unfortunately, instead of doing so, they were often used for personal purposes. This is the art of complicity, or the act of complicity, which helped a coalition or alliance between the landowners and the government, which allowed a easier way to rule. Okay. Now, this point I will come back to again later in my paper. Draupadi, however, is the woman figure, the leading lady of the tribals, who deconstructs every notion of accepted femininity by leading a momentous tribal movement against him and by thwarting his overlordship, creating an oppositional conflict that the Senanayak finds hard to overcome. This is what engages Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, a post-colonial and feminist critic, as a translator. In the spring of 1967, there was a successful peasant rebellion in the Naxalbari area of the northern part of West Bengal. Spivak quotes, "Unlike most other areas of West Bengal, where peasant movements are led almost solely by middle-class leadership from Calcutta, Naxalbari has spawned an indigenous agrarian reform leadership by the lower classes, including tribal cultivators." I unquote here, this peculiar coalition of peasant and intellectual sparked off a number of Naxalites all over India. The target of these movements was the long-established oppression of the landless peasantry and farm worker, sustained through an unofficial government-landlord collusion that too easily circumvented the law. In 1970, the implicit hostility between East and West Pakistan flamed into armed struggle. In 1971, the armed forces of the Government of India were employed to subjugate the guerrilla style of warfare that was being used by the Naxalites, that included a rebellious section of the rural population, most significantly the tribals. Taking advantage of the defeat of West Pakistan in 1971, Indian government was able to crack down upon the rebels too. This was a turning point in the Senanayak's character, and this forms the setting of the short story Draupadi. Draupadi Mahajan is the name given to a Santal tribal woman who is the central character of the story. The name was given not by her own people. You see, no Santal would name a child by the Sanskrit name of Draupadi. It was given by her mistress in the usual mode of benevolence felt by the oppressor, in this case Shudra Shahu's wife, towards the tribal bond servant. The name is caught, as the translator Spivak points out, between two versions, Draupadi and Draupadi. It is either that as a tribal she cannot pronounce her own Sanskrit name Draupadi, or the tribalized form Draupadi could have been the proper name for the ancient Draupadi. Draupadi in the short story is the wife of Dulna Majhi, who dies in the tribal warfare. She is on the most wanted list, and the price of rupees 100 waits upon her arrest. Thus, from the beginning, Draupadi projects not the figure of a helpless widow, but a female leader of the tribal movement that included the Santals and centered around Charkhani forest. As Mahashika Devi points out, that the tribe in warfare is the Santals, not to be confused with the 9 other Munda tribes that inhabit India. The first comment made about Draupadi is she is a most notorious female. Dulna Majhi and Draupadi Majan worked at harvests between Birbhum, Burdwan, Mushidabad and Bankura. But since 1971, the Operation Bakuli, they had to first fake death and then go underground. In this Operation Bakuli, 3 villages had been cordoned off and machine gunned. Dulna and Draupadi had instigated the murder of the landlord Surya Sahu and his son at Birbhum. Surya Sahu, in keeping with the policy of compliance with the government, with the landlords, had been allowed to dig. As I mentioned earlier, the collusion between the government and the landlord had been allowed to dig with the help of Biri Babu within his compound 2 tube wells and 3 wells. This policy of complicity, as I said, was a sort of goodwill relationship followed by the government and the wealthy landlords. But these facilities were often misused by the wealthy landlords. And so Surya Sahu was supposed to supply water to the tribals and also water the fields. But instead, they were being used for personal gains. This gave rise to a dispute between the landlord Surya Sahu and the tribals. And Dulna and Draupadi Majhi instigated a rebellion against them and instigated the murder of Surya Sahu and his son. Since then, the couple had gone underground. Dulna and Draupadi went into complete darkness. Many Santals had been killed in the search for them. This is because, firstly, the couple were very skilled at self-concealment, and secondly, to the special forces, the tribals looked identical in the dark. Dulna Majhi and Draupadi Mahajan worked around the Jharkhand belt after they went underground. Guerrilla warfare continued around the notorious forests of Jharkhand. There were hair-raising accounts of how the tribals attacked the police stations, stealing guns, killing grain brokers, landlords, moneylenders, law officers, and bureaucrats. A black-skinned couple would ululate, that is, give a war cry before every attack. This couple was Dulna and Draupadi. Thus, in the story Draupadi, Dulna and Draupadi are instigators and leaders of tribal warfare. They give cause enough to cause blood pressure and diabetes to Captain Arjun Singh, the policeman in charge, so that he was forced to retire. In his place came Sena Nayak, the representative of the First World oppressor. By First World oppressor, I mean the remnants of colonial subjugation. The colonial subjugation which was seen earlier, the British ruling over the Indians, that was filtered on to the landlords who adapted that, policy of colonial subjugation and oppression upon the marginalized, the Dalits or the tribals. Okay, So I'm not saying that it is a direct infiltration, but it is a remnant or filtration of the colonial collusion and colonial act of complicity and colonial oppression into the Indian social order system. The Army Handbook said that guerrilla warfare was the most despicable and repulsive style of fighting with primitive weapons. Annihilation at sight of any and all practitioners of such warfare is the sacred duty of every soldier. Dulna and Draupadi belong to such category of fighters. They killed by means of hatchet, scythe, bow, and arrow. They did not know the use of guns. When the Santals attacked police quarters, they would say, "Empty your chambers," as they were uneducated. They could not say, "Empty your guns" or "empty your barrels." But the weapons that Dulna and Draupadi used had been used by their people for generations, and they knew their use very well. Sena Nayak, like the British colonizer, knew that the enemy was to be respected because the opposition could neither be understood nor demolished. But he believed that the world would change. People would forget the history of bloodbath and would hold him in respect. He also believed in the motto, "In order to destroy the enemy, become one." After escaping from Bakuli, Dulna and Draupadi had worked in the household of almost every landowner and acted as informants. The soldiers were in constant search of the couple, and in one such search, betrayed by Dukhiram Ghorai, an army informant, Dulna Machi was killed. Before dying, he had given a war cry of Maho, which had identified him as a tribal from Malda. Dulna's body was used as a bait to trap Draupadi, but she did not fall into the trap. Nobody came to claim Dulna's body. In such guerrilla warfare, hundreds of bodies could be seen lying in the forests for the scavengers to devour. Some of them were badly beaten, mangled, kidnapped, with broken ribs and hands. This gives an account of how the tribals carried on their warfare against government oppression, and Operation Jharkhani Forest did not stop. The text also creates a different construct for Draupadi. Draupadi Mahajan is the leader and instigator of the guerrilla warfare with her husband. She is alone and widowed. After going underground, she has assumed the name of Upi Mahajan and does not respond to the name Draupadi. She is thus a sentinel. She carries a baby scythe round her waist. She has lice in her head. She smokes bidi. She talks in code language like squash 4, onions 7, peppers 50. She is Comrade Draupadi. The instructions among her people are, if she returns, good. If she does not return, bad. And they must change hideout. After the death of her husband, Draupadi was still acting as the leader. The mission of the government was, catch Draupadi Mahajan, she will lead us to the others. In the second section of the story, Draupadi was proceeding slowly with some cold rice knotted in her belt. Suddenly, she is called by the name Draupadi. She does not respond because since going underground, she has adopted the name of Upi. This is the mark of an alert soldier. Draupadi had 200 rupees now waiting upon her. Draupadi had said to Mushai Tudu's wife that if they caught her, They would counter her, but she would not give anybody's name. Draupadi was a true leader of her people. Her husband Dulna had liked to think of themselves as soldiers. In the second section of the story, Draupadi acts as a true soldier. Draupadi knew if she was arrested, she would be tortured. But she knew how to deal with torture. Her mind and body would give away, but she would not bite off her tongue before giving her name or any name. Thus, Draupadi, in her determination and leadership, poses as a serious threat to the opposition. When she is called by her name, she does not respond. She remembers the Bakuli incident and how Bakuli had burned and how signaling police cars had come searching for them, demanding their surrender. Dulna and Draupadi had decided they would work around Jharkhand and they would not beget children or raise a family. Here too, Draupadi is the true leader who had sacrificed her family life for the sake of her people. Although a female, she counters every trace of femininity in her role as a leader and a sentinel. Draupadi is fierce. She decides to trap the police cop who was following her. She had noted the army camp set up in the forest, so she would not go that way. She decided to take 3.5 miles of rocky ground to enter the forest. In every move of the story, it is seen that Draupadi is projected as a challenge to the government adversary. She is as much a policeman as they are, noting every arrival of police convoys, every inclusion of radio vans. She is as much an army sentinel as an army man. She knows that the army could not have struck camp on a rocky terrain. Draupadi would lead the cop to the burning ghat and sacrifice him in the name of goddess Kali. In her ferocity, she represents much of the goddess. But betrayed by her own tribesmen, she is arrested. She finds herself right in the hands of the Senanayak. Senanayak had followed his motto, if you want to destroy the enemy, become one, and anticipated Draupadi's movements. Senanayak is the male tyrannical opponent to Draupadi. His intention is to search out the veteran fighter and destroy her. But before being arrested, Draupadi raises her arms and gives a war cry because she knows she is going into battle. In 1963, Betty Friedan, the American feminist, wrote the book The Feminist Mystique, where she discussed the concept of equality feminism. She advocated legal equality for women, which, however, found many opponents. It was argued that equality feminism cured the symptoms of sexual femininity, but not the disease. Yet, Friedan's equality feminism became incredibly popular in traditionally liberal America. It was similar to class equality and provided an answer to the disease of female oppression. As Simone de Beauvoir also argues in the second sex, that there is no such thing as feminine nature. Womanhood is imposed upon them. Throughout history and cultures, women have always been second-class citizens. Even when worshipped or adored, they have no autonomy. But preordained human nature emphasizes the freedom and responsibility of each person to create him or herself as a self-governing individual. However, de Beauvoir argues, woman is always situated as other to the man. The man is always the subject self, the I, while the woman is the object, the other. The expression feminism first became apparent in the English language in the 1890s, a noteworthy historical moment when there was an urgent need to name the activities of the women's movement, which was vivacious and popular as never before. Late 19th century feminism joined together women from different classes and social backgrounds. Although the initial enthusiasm was to be dampened, and many found their interests ignored by the politics adopted by the leading figures, it achieved the status of a social movement. While more recent feminist criticism warns against understanding woman as a homogeneous category and emphasizes the mistake of eradicating the unique characteristics of different groupings in the late 19th century, the emergence of a solidarity across national and class barriers was perceived as so novel that the common factor of being a woman was perceived as outweighing the difference. Amid other things, the working conditions of female laborers were so unexcusable that the primary objective was to strive for some improvement. For instance, pregnant women were not infrequently found to work right up to the delivery of the baby, and indeed sometimes gave birth in the factory itself. Like any politically oriented movement, the women's movements, which formed in different national settings, had to deal with the grossest social injustices of their daily experiences. Only then could it begin to think about equal rights among its members. The struggle for women's rights was no new phenomenon in the late 19th century. Countless female authors who have recently been retrieved from a silence imposed by a patriarchally based historiography testify to a long standing tradition of protest against women's supposed physical, moral, and intellectual inferiority. Women have always protested about the injustice of gender discrimination. In the British context, Mary Astor and Mary Wollstonecraft in political writings and the vindication of the rights of women respectively, and also eminent voices of the late 17th and late 18th centuries respectively, produced thorough critiques of the double standards of conventional morality. They are among the most famous, but by no means the first thinkers to argue that the normative definition of femininity reflects the wish to perpetuate women's dependent position. Once it assumed the campaign for access to the culturally prestigious professions as one of its most important issues, early 20th century feminism had a decisively middle class and white bent. The argument over women's rights to embark on a professional career reflects the struggle of middle class women to enter the world of their male social equals and prioritizes the political forum as the place to promote their interests. Working women, as such, were no new phenomenon. Working class women and women of color had long been going out of their houses to work as domestic servants. Women had worked on the fields, and ever since factories were built in the early 19th century, women formed a significant percentage of the labor force. Towards the end of the 19th century, the number of mostly unmarried working class women who worked outside their homes was rising dramatically. The fact that women significantly outnumbered men in many Western countries in the 19th century, moreover, heightened indignation that more than half of the population had no civil rights except insofar as they were derived from the rights of male relatives. Virginia Woolf's classic, A Room of One's Own, published in 1928, begins with the famous description of how women are prevented from entering into libraries and universities. Woolf maintains that the female gender is defined as the opposite of what counts as the chief object of interest, masculinity. Her disagreement that women function as looking glasses which aggrandize male preoccupations with war and the heroic ethos of conventional historiography exposes authors. Finally, she posits the existence of a woman's sentence, arguing that women register and express experience differently, which thus calls for a revision of the standards used to appraise women's artistic position. From the beginning, Draupadi challenges all notions of femininity. She conforms to the feminist idea of female equality. Through Draupadi, Mahashika Devi has tried to raise certain questions of responsibility, as she herself demands certain political responses from us. She expects us to know something about the Naxalbari movement, and she also wants us to understand something about the revolution that Draupadi is fighting. The most interesting part of the story is that Draupadi is portrayed as an uneducated tribal woman. Yet, she leads the politicized life among all because she is engaged in an armed struggle for the rights and freedom of the tribal people. Being a tribal means that she is not a part of the mainstream Hindu society. She occupies the lowest rung in a class-based society. Yet, the status and respect accorded to her within her tribal society is far superior to any woman of the mainstream Hindu society. Luz Irigaray says in the work Revolutions of the Word, it is man who has been the subject of discourse, whether in the field of theory, morality, or politics. And the gender of God, the guardian of every subject and discourse, is always paternal and masculine in the West. For women, there remain the so-called minor art forms cooking, knitting, sewing, and embroidery, and in exceptional cases, poetry, painting, and music. Whatever their importance, these arts do not lay down the law. Irigaray comments that transition to a new age necessitates a new conception and new perception of the relationship between man and woman. Draupadi challenges all norms of accepted femininity and projects a totally new feminine construct that baffles her opposition and to some extent the readers. In the final section of the story, Draupadi Mahajan is raped by multiple policemen. She is punished for her alleged political crime. Here, we must draw the parallel with Draupadi of the epic Mahabharata. On the level of the text, the elusive and fortuitous name of Draupadi does play a role. To speculate upon this role, Spivak says one might consider the Mahabharata itself in its colonialist function in the interest of the so-called Aryan invaders of India. It is an accretive epic where the sacred geography of an ancient battle is slowly expanded by succeeding generations of poets so that the secular geography of the expanding Aryan colony can present itself as identical with it and justify itself. The complexity of this vast and anonymous project makes it an incomparably more heterogeneous text than the Ramayana. Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak says, and I quote, "The ancient Draupadi is perhaps the most celebrated heroine of the Indian epic Mahabharata. Mahabharata contains cases of various kinds of kinship structure and various styles of marriage. It is Draupadi who provides the only example of polyandry, not a common system of marriage in India. She is married to the 5 Pandava brothers. Within a patriarchal and patronymic context, she is exceptional, indeed singular in the sense of odd. Mahashika Devi's story questions the singularity of the epical Draupadi by placing the tribal Draupadi first in a monogamous marriage and then subjecting her to multiple rape. In the epic, Draupadi's legitimized pluralization as a wife among husbands actually demonstrates male glory. She provides the occasion for a violent transaction between men. She was put to stake by her eldest husband and lost. According to Karna, one of the rejected sons of Kunti, the Queen Kunti, since scriptures provided one husband for one woman and she had multiple husbands, therefore she was a prostitute. Therefore, there was nothing improper in bringing her clothed or unclothed into the assembly. The enemy chief there, Dushashana, who represented the tyrant patriarch, began to pull at her sari. But by the grace of Lord Krishna, Draupadi could not be unclothed. By not being publicly stripped, Draupadi of the epic challenges male glory, male greed, male hunger, oppression, and triumph. Draupadi is infinitely clothed. Mahashika Devi's story rewrites this episode. In Draupadi's rape, the men easily succeed in stripping Draupadi. The subaltern Draupadi is silenced. Draupadi in this story is named, constructed, displaced, and silenced. The tribals would thus be silenced by various means: raped, maligned, kidnapped, murdered, mutilated. In the third section of the story, Draupadi is tortured and raped throughout that endless night and mutilated by a handful of lustful men. When she refuses to let out any information, it is said, "Make her," which means do the needful. She is brutally made as a punishment for her alleged political travels. For a woman, to be maimed is to be physically raped. But she refuses to be clothed. She remains publicly naked at her own insistence. She tears at her white cloth with her teeth, and this makes the opposition scared. When she stands before the Senanayak with her mangled breasts, she challenges all form of male authority. She goes up to the Senanayak and says, "What's the use of clothes? You can strip me, but how can you clothe me again? Are you a man?" It is here that male leadership stops. Her refusal to be clothed, pointing at herself derisively as the object of your search, is based on the argument that there are no men there. Therefore, she need not be clothed. By negating the manhood of the police standing around, he effaces the identity of men altogether, and the opposition in the form of male tyranny is challenged. She unnerves the Senanayak and emerges as the most powerful subject, an unarmed target. Certain similarities with Queen Draupadi of the Epics is noted here. Draupadi had also underground, like Draupadi of the Epics, had gone underground, like Draupadi of the Epics with her husband. Draupadi, at the end of her mutilation, challenges the Senanayak, asking them to counter her if they dared. Similarly, Draupadi of the Epics had questioned all the elders of the assembly. Draupadi had committed the mistake of laughing at Duryodhana at Indraprastha. Draupadi Mehachan is on the wrong side of law. Both Draupadi and Draupadi are punished because they are seen as objects. What happens to Draupadi is what can happen only to a woman. And it is this that she uses as a weapon to become a super object and challenge the very manhood of the Senanayak and all the police officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuradha, for this very, very illuminating and wonderful, wonderful lecture. It was fascinating to hear from you, and you probed every angle brilliantly, and you gave us a new fodder for thought. So we will be coming back to you with the questions only at the end of the second session. So thank you once again. And now I would request Professor Shilpa Marik to come and introduce the second speaker. Over to you, Shilpa. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhishida, and thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation and wonderful lecture. We are truly flourished, ma'am. And ma'am, Radhishida has already said to you that we have decided to conduct the question answer session at the end of the webinar. So if you have no problem, please stay with us, ma'am. And thank you once again to all of our participants for your hearty support. And now it's time to welcome our second speaker, Dr. Shati Mukherjee, Associate Professor, currently the head of the Department of English, Gurudas College, Kolkata. But before giving her the stage, I would like to put some words regarding her prestigious profile. Dr. Mukherjee is also a guest lecturer in the Department of English of Calcutta and Lady Brabourne College, teaching American literature text to postgraduate students. Her MPhil from Jadavpur University was on American drama, and her PhD from Calcutta University, working on American fiction, especially Theodore Dreiser. Her first book was released at Kolkata Book Fair of 2018 and is on the societal influences in the works of Tennessee Williams. And she is currently working on her second book on American literature. And today she will be sharing with us her expert opinion on the topic, The Color Purple, a narrative of empowerment. Dr. Mukherjee, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and a very warm welcome to you, ma'am. The floor is yours now, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good evening, viewers. Today, I would like to start by thanking the principal, IQAC, and the Department of English of Shampur Siddheshwari Mahavidyalaya for inviting me to speak at this prestigious webinar. Today, I would like to share my observations on Alice Walker's novel, The Color Purple. This talk is basically directed towards students of English literature because, as I understand, this text is now a part of the syllabi of certain universities. Okay. So before I start discussing the text, just bear with me till I give a brief recap about the background which led to the writing of this novel. We are talking of the genre of Afro-American literature, which is usually considered from the beginning of the 20th century. I would like to focus on the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance is around the 1920s, the first quarter of the 20th century, and it has produced a very rich body of work from the Black writers. Now, even though the work, the output of this age is extremely memorable, it's extremely well known, the one thing which students will realize when they go through this is that it is mainly about Black male repression. Women are usually not represented, so either they are ignored or misrepresented or totally left out of it. So it was not basically a literature which focuses on women. About this, I'd just like to quote a phrase rather, from the book by feminist critic Bell Hooks. And in her work, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism. Bell Hooks, in the work Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, she says that during slavery, it was the Black American woman who was in the worst possible condition in American society, and they had the lowest status. Their living conditions were absolutely deplorable, and she registers her protest in her work, and I'm just quoting a short phrase. Virtually no scholarly attention has been given to the oppression of Black women during slavery. Underlying this is the assumption that the experiences of men are more important than those of women, and what matters most among the experiences of men is their ability to assert themselves patriarchally. So that is the key word, in my opinion, assert themselves patriarchally. And I think this becomes very relevant in the context of the novel that we will be discussing right now. So if it is, the highlight is on male repression and male output, literary output, it is only after a certain time that there was the rediscovery of the voice of the African American woman. We have writers and students, you're familiar, of course, with the works of writers like Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, who have registered the struggle, the painful journey of the Black women. They are not only fighting the external forces of, say, gender or racism or whatever, but they are also trying to move out of that vicious circle. So what happens is these writers, they have not given a very negative or depressive picture of only the torture and the struggle. What they have done is, while highlighting the struggle, they have also celebrated the empowerment of women. And that is what makes their work so very powerful even today. So this body of literature is especially important for us because it was written by and for women. The protagonists were women writers. So this made a lot of impact on the next generation of readers. Right. Among the most prolific of the Black American women writers is, of course, Alice Walker. She became famous for writing The Color Purple. And students, you're familiar with the term epistolary novel. Yes, novel written in the form of letters. You have read this before. So this novel is an epistolary novel where most of the action takes place through letters. Right. So while I'm introducing the novel, if for those who have read it, it will be easier for you to identify. For even those who haven't read it as yet, this is an interesting fact that Sally Harris, who is the protagonist of this novel, she is writing letters to God. And why is that? She was raped, abused, sexually abused by her father, whom, of course, later on, when we discuss towards the end of the novel, she discovers it's actually her stepfather. So anyway, so at this point, she knows that's her father, and he was regularly abusing her, and he had threatened her not to reveal this fact to any other human being. So I'd just like to quote his words. You better never tell anybody but God, I'd kill your mammy. So she is threatened because she feels that her mother will be killed. So instead of sharing her trauma, her abuse, the torture, mental and physical, with any other mortal, she starts communicating with God. So this is, in my opinion, the first step of communication with another human being. She starts communicating through letters. This is her private domain. It is done in complete solitude. No one else knows about it. And she speaks about her trauma to God. And I'll come to that a little later, her relationship with God and her attitude towards God. We'll discuss that a little later. So just as I'm going through the introduction of the novel, she is abused by her father, and then she is kind of sold off, or given off rather, to this person called Mr. I mean, she never calls her husband by name. His name was Albert. She is given off to Mr. who had actually wanted to marry her sister Nettie, but the father convinces Albert that he would be at an advantageous position if he married Sally. She's spoiled, she ugly, but she'll make the better wife. She ain't smart either, but she can work like a man. So do you realize how very, very blatant this kind of a statement is? The word spoiled, L-E-D, like it's not spoiled, like a spoiled child. It's not that. She's spoiled. That is, she has been abused. She has been exploited. And yet, it would be better if you marry her because she can work like a man. So you have to reach masculine standards in order to be accepted as somebody's wife. So you see what kind of a position or status women enjoyed in the Black community in those days. Right. And here it shows that the exploitation which Alice Walker is highlighting at this point of time is not so much racial as it is gender-based. For instance, it is not the exploitation of white people of Black people. It is Black men of Black women. Right. So that is something you could just think about, because this is Alice Walker's thing that even within the Black community, there is exploitation. So in this novel, I felt, and this is my personal observation, the racial oppression is superseded by sexual exploitation. That is more of a problem in this novel than, so gender supersedes race in this novel, in my opinion. And the narrative of empowerment, as I've given a subtitle to this talk, is because from a silent victim, Sally Harris redefines herself, and she builds up a support system around her from the various women characters who enter her life, and she becomes an active agent in her own life. So, in spite of so many challenges, physical, mental, psychological, emotional, and financial, of course, she's not qualified enough to earn any money. So, she rises above all this. And like a phoenix, she rediscovers herself, redefines her womanhood. And this is the story, the narrative of empowerment. Okay. As I said, the talk today I have divided into three parts, dealing with the support system that Sally Harris has, and these are the female role models which come into her life. For students, you have seen the scaffolding of a building, right? So before a building, and when a building is like being constructed, you have the external structure around it. That is there until the building reaches its full height, it's constructed, it's complete, and you remove the scaffold. So I would like to consider that the three role models, the female role models in Sally's life, they act as a scaffold. They help her to grow, they help her develop, they help her self-confidence, and they transform her from a dumb, a tortured individual to a self-confident entrepreneur. The first support that Sally receives is from her sister Nettie. Nettie was the object of attention of her husband Albert, but as I said, he was convinced by the father that it would be to his advantage for Sally because she does not protest and she can be made to work like an animal. So, but Nettie also knew that if she stayed with her sister, Albert would not leave her alone. So she has no other option, but she leaves for Africa. There are a lot of events in between. I mean, I'm just highlighting the points which I thought was relevant for this talk today. So she leaves for Africa. Before leaving for Africa, she tries to encourage her sister. She knows what kind her sister is, and she tries to encourage her sister by saying, "You got to fight, you got to fight," to which Sally replies, "But I don't know how to fight. All I know how to do is to stay alive." So that is where she is. Even surviving is such a problem for her. It can, I mean, she can be eliminated any moment at the whim of her husband. So this is what, that let me live first. I'll think about fighting later on. Perhaps she's trying to tell her sister that. They try to keep in touch by letters, but it so happens that Albert, he takes away the letters that Nettie writes to her sister from Africa. And this he deliberately does because he does not want Sally to get any kind of emotional support from anywhere. He wants her to be an emotional wreck, and the kind we like, sometimes we are cruel to animals. We make them work on the fields. You've read the Ox, Mrs. Thurlow's character, of course, you're familiar with. So it is like you can keep them under control as long as they are not aware of their rights and as long as they do not react. So if she does not have any support, it would be much easier to make her work and make her do her duty. Right. I don't say nothing. I don't fight. I stay where I'm told, but I'm alive. So even staying alive is a wonder for her. That every day that I'm still alive today, I haven't been killed. So it starts from there. That is the initial stage of her rise to empowerment, from survival and then rediscovering herself. Okay, about the letters, it is when you go through the novel, you will realize the letters which Sally writes to God and the letters which Nettie writes to Sally, these do not reach the addressee. Right. Nettie's letters are intercepted by the husband, who is Albert, because he does not want Sally to have any kind of bonding anywhere. She should be completely, like a dumb animal. And the letters that Sally writes to God, obviously, there is no response. So she feels totally left out, isolated, alienated, and she feels that if this is life, it is almost like a living hell. There is absolutely nothing to look forward to into the next day. She had, because her father used to rape her, she had 2 children who were taken away from her before she got married. And so she has no emotional bond except with her sister Nettie, who is also physically removed from her, and there is no attempt, there is no sign of communication as of now. And in these letters, as this is the first part of the relationship of Sally's female idols, that Sally's letters show us that her grammar, her syntax, her sentences, etc., they are evidences of being semi-literate. She was taken away from school because she was only 14 years old, and then she was taken away from school forcefully, given off, as for marriage, she was married off to Albert, etc. So Nettie is, in that comparison to her, is better educated. While her language, the letters she writes are much more succinct and they are concise and they write correct English. So Nettie's letters, when they are discovered, and I'll discuss that at the site later, that how they are discovered. So Nettie's letters, when they are discovered, Sally reads and finds that Nettie is writing from Africa about the Olinka tribes. They are the cultural roots of Nettie Sally and her family. So these Olinka tribes, they were also very backward, and they had no voice, and the missionaries and white colonizers used to ill-treat them, kill them, torture them. So we as Indians know what colonizers did to our country, right? So anyway, so suddenly once she comes to know that the Olinkas also have begun their revolt by reacting against the white colonizers. So this letter, that if the Olinkas can react and revolt against the powerful white colonizers, then why can't I do it? So the point I'm trying to make here, and why I have taken this part as an illustration, is that Nettie's letter about the Olinka revolt acts as a catalyst which powers her to start her own revolt. Right. So her initial stage was, this is Sally speaking, I say to myself, Sally, you a tree. That's how come I know trees fear man. So this is her starting point. You a tree. So the first word which comes to our mind when we talk of tree is the word wood, right? So wooden expression, right? No mobility. Does a tree protest when we cut it down? It just stands there. It does its duty. It provides us with so many things, and yet we cut it down. So Sally says, I have to remind myself that I am like the tree. It is only my turn to do my duty, and I get nothing in return. I can be cut down anytime I want. So that was her starting point. But the letter of Nettie acts as a catalyst that even I can start revolting, and this is what starts her journey of empowerment. Right. The second role model in Sally's life is, of course, Shug Avery. Now, this is a very interesting relationship. Why is this a very interesting relationship? Because Shug Avery is, for those of you who have read it, she is the mistress of her husband, Albert. So in normal circumstances, what happens is that the wife and the other woman, they are hostile towards each other. They do not want, intruding into their space. So one tries to throw the other out of the perimeter of the house. But here, Alice Walker, she has shown how instead of humiliating and pulling down Sally, Shah Avery, who is an independent woman and the love interest of Albert, she builds up Sally's self-confidence. Now that part I found extremely interesting and very encouraging, because she gives Sally the support to empower herself. She not only helps to find Nettie's letters, as we were just discovering that Nettie's letters were hidden away. It is Shag Avery who finds the letters for Sally. It is then Sally realizes that Nettie is alive and well, so I can also write to her and also start communicating with her. So this part of the revolt, this is still a silent revolt, mind you. This part of the revolt is that Nettie no longer, sorry, Sally, excuse me, Sally no longer addresses her letters to God, who is not responsive. She starts addressing her sister Nettie. So what happens? This is the first time that she has taken a decision for herself. So far is, it was so humiliating. Albert says, go and get the belt. She goes and gets the belt so that he can beat her black and blue. What kind of a relationship is that between husband and wife? But she did that. I am a tree, I am a tree, I am a tree. So a tree does not protest, so I should also not protest. Let me be alive first. Survival is the basic thing that I need to worry about right now. So this is the first decision she has taken, that I will no longer write to God, and we will discuss her relationship with God, attitude towards God shortly. So I will no longer write to God anymore because he is indifferent, he does not care, he does not respond to my pain. So she starts writing to Nettie. This is the next step of her empowerment, when she starts discussing her trauma with another living being. So far, it is still a silent protest because it is through letters and she has not been able to speak out loud in society. Okay, so we were talking about Shag Avery. Now, the relation, as I just said, was is extremely encouraging, because Shag says that I will not leave until he stops abusing you. So this is Shag Avery. I won't leave, she says, until I know Albert won't even think about beating you. So the support that she gets from Shag is really, really worthy of mention, because Shag is a singer, blues. You have heard of the blues and the jazz music of the African Americans. So she is a singer and she has made a name for herself. She does not need a man to support her. She has a career, even though she has children with Albert. Yet she keeps the children at her parents' place because she concentrates on her career. All these kind of decisions are extremely radical, and for Sally, it's like a dream that somebody can take these decisions and not be beaten about it. So this is a major role model, in my opinion, the best role model for Sally Harris in the novel. So when Shag is singing a song once in a juke, pub kind of thing, so juke point. So she dedicates a song to Sally. And Sally says, talking about Shag, she says, this song I'm about to sing is called Miss Sally's Song. First time somebody made something and named it after me. So you see, this little bit of appreciation, this little bit of recognition is something which Sally had never experienced. It kind of lifts her up from the depths of depression that she has known all her life. So this kind of appreciation is what Shag says, that you deserve this. You deserve this because there is so much within you which is untapped. And it is your responsibility to get out of your hole and then express yourself in front of society. So with Shag's encouragement, she gains the strength to shout back at her husband. So the point I'm trying to stress here is she has started with a silent protest of writing letters. So For usually, what happens in a culture, any culture, we start with the oral word, right? A literature cannot start. So it is an oral tradition. After that, it proceeds to the written tradition. Please excuse me. Thank you. So it proceeds to the written tradition. Here, Alice Walker has inverted the process. How has she reversed the process? Sally starts by writing letters. That is the silent part. But now she starts speaking out. That is a measure of her empowerment. As I said, this is a narrative of empowerment. That is the measure of her empowerment, where she has the confidence to shout back at her husband. Her husband cannot understand why she is reacting, and he asks what is wrong. And this is what she says. This is Sally to her husband, Albert. You, a low down dog, is what's wrong, I say. It's time to leave you and enter into the creation. And your dead body is just the welcome mat I need. So can you imagine this coming from Sally? That I will be happy to walk over your dead body because that is a mat I need to step out into the world. And from this living death, this existence of a living death, she says, it is time for me to enter into the creation. So this is a very, very major step forward for Sally Harris, and this has been facilitated by Shag Avery. Right. But Albert does not give in so easily. Why? He knows, because if she leaves, he will have a lot on his hands and he will not be able to handle all this kind of work that she has been doing for so many years. Excuse me. So he starts humiliating her. He says, look at you, you black, you poor, you ugly, you a woman, you nothing at all. You see the different parameters that Alice Walker has included? Black, poor, ugly. So financial constraint, you are not good looking enough to ensnare a man, and you are also black. African American woman, the lowest strata, what Bell Hooks said, as I quoted in the beginning. So you nothing at all. So what have you got that you will go out into the world? But now Sally is not intimidated anymore. That was a thing of the past, where she was always submissive and she was willing to get beaten up just to keep peace in the house. Now she says, I am poor, yes, I am black, I may be ugly, and I can't cook, but I am here. So just 3 words, I am here, but I am here. It's kind of saying what we say today, I've arrived. So from a claustrophobic environment, she is moving towards liberation, right? It is a liberated atmosphere that she is moving towards. And I'm here, that I have moved out of your claustrophobic environment, the toxic environment that he had built up at home. So I'm here. So it doesn't matter how I look. I have the confidence to make a life for myself, right? Another aspect of Sally's relationship with Shag Avery, and introduced by Alice Walker, this movie, this story was also made into a movie. I think it was Steven Spielberg who made into a movie, and this aspect was just subtly hinted. It wasn't shown, but here Alice Walker has dealt to some extent with this relationship. Shag Avery and Sally Harris also share some amount of physical intimacy, right? So this sexual encounter with Shag is very, very different from the relationships that Sally is used to all through her life. When she was a teenager, before she got married, she was being raped, and that was something she had to put up with. After she got married to Albert, it was a kind of marital abuse. It was another kind of rape. It was oppression, of physical oppression, abuse. So it was only a kind of an expression of patriarchal power, right? It was male sexuality is a sign of patriarchal power in this novel. So what Alice Walker does is that she has shown how this physical intimacy with a woman is mutual, it is out of consent, and the fact is that it is a reciprocal relationship. It is not one-sided, it is not aggressive, it is not violent, but it is something which actively shapes her identity as a woman. So Shag Avery is not only a benefactor, she is also a lover and builds her up in so many ways because Sally realizes that her body is not something to be ashamed of. It is a very beautiful part of nature. It is a creation which needs to be appreciated, loved, nourished. It is not something which can be utilized by somebody else so that she feels so much of pain and abuse and torture and all that. So it is not one-sided, and this is the first time that she has felt something where she can also give, where somebody feels for her, and it is a mutually reciprocal relationship. That is why I think Alice Walker introduced this, because as I said, that Sally Harris has role models here, and all the three role models are women. So if she is talking about patriarchal domination, the relationships with the women are positive, and relationship with her husband, father, etc. are very, very repressive and negative. Okay, so Shag has another contribution to Shelley's emancipation, emancipation, and that is that she changes her attitude, understanding of God. Right. God, why? The novel begins with the fact that she has been writing letters to God. There has been no response. She considers him to be just as indifferent and unresponsive as all the men in her life. And that is why the God in her psyche is a white male. Now, I'd like to quote here. She assumed that God was not only white, but also a male. She described him as old and tall and gray bearded and white. So, old and tall and gray bearded and white. So, she is within the patriarchal understanding of a Christian God who is white, male, and a he, right? So this is why he is so indifferent to my plight, because she is relating her experiences with men with the God who is, she has been told, is a male. Okay. Anyhow, I say, the God I been praying and writing to is a man and act just like all the other men I know. So he's not different in any way. So remember, as we said, that she does not write letters to God anymore. As soon as she knows her sister Nettie is alive and well, she immediately shifts her focus of attention and starts communicating with her sister. So God is out of her focus because he is as bad as the other men in her life. This was her concept. Now what happens? With the influence of Shag, with the positive influence of Shag, she redefines her concept of God. So earlier it was a patriarchal image of a white, indifferent, non-responsive man. Now, for her, God has become a pantheistic divinity. Students, you're familiar with the theory of pantheism, of course. You know that, you've done the romantics. So, God is present in all forms of nature, in people. So, not being an indifferent or dominating male white person. Here, Alice Walker does not give a he or she to God because she has left the gender part out of it, as Sally Harris has problems with that. So it is an it. God is an it. And her God, the God that she has learned to appreciate now, is present in different forms of nature. And I'll quote from here. Dear God, dear stars, dear trees, dear sky, dear peoples, dear everything, dear God. So this God is not unresponsive. It surrounds her with its beauty, love, and warmth. She can see it wherever she looks, in people, in his creation, in nature, everywhere. So it is neither male nor female. It is a spirit which is residing inseparable part of the natural world. And her realization after her transformation is, and when you can feel that or be happy to feel that, you have found it. So that is the connect of the human soul with divinity. When you can connect, you feel a sense of happiness. All these are very new to her. She has never been happy. Nobody has ever thought about her. So these are parts of her evolution towards being a self-assertive, independent woman, part of her growth. Right. Okay. Now, Sally, as you can make out, has become extremely dependent on Shag Avery. Right. Shag is building her up in so many ways. However, Alice Walker, at one part of the novel, removes Shag Avery from Sally's circumference of her attention because Shag is into another relationship, and that is, of course, very, very painful to Sally. She says, "My heart broke. Shag loved somebody else." So Shag moves out for some time. But I suppose, and this is my interpretation, that this is also important for Sally's growth because Alice Walker felt that now the scaffolding is no longer needed. The building can stand on its own, right? That was the metaphor or analogy I had given at the beginning. So the building can stand on its own. The scaffolding is no longer needed. At first, Sally feels that her spirit will be broken and I'll go back to where I was. But Alice Walker does not allow that. She manages to restore and rehabilitate Sally's confidence in herself. So what happens is, remember, empowerment in today's world is not always possible unless you are financially stable. So that aspect is also taken care of by Alice Walker. Sally Harris, after she moves out from her husband, she becomes a designer. Now this point is also interesting. Why is this interesting? She becomes a designer not of, say, women's clothing like dresses, skirts, gowns, not that. She becomes a designer of folk pants, right? So remember, I'm not talking of today, obviously. Initially, pants were a part of attire of the masculine gender, right? So this is what Sally Harris is doing. She is building one standard size slacks for both men and women. So do you realize what Alice Walker is doing here? That she is building one standard size slacks for both men and women. In my opinion, this is a very potent metaphor. Why is this? This metaphor shows that there is a blurring of discrimination or distinction between the male and the female. There should be no distinction. So there should be equal opportunities available to both men and women. And this is seen through the metaphor of Sally Harris becoming a designer of pants, which are used by both men and women. See, even through this imagery and metaphors throughout the novel, Alice Walker is saying so much to us. So there is so much to say. I could go on for this a long time, but I've just taken a few points which can highlight and sort of help you to think and extend your opinion about this. Right. The third role model for Sally Harris is her stepdaughter-in-law, Sophia. Sophia is the wife of Harpo. Harpo, Sophia, they are the son and daughter-in-law of her husband, Albert, from his first marriage. And Sophia and Sally, they also strike up a bond. She is also good to her stepmother-in-law. Initially, Sally was jealous of Sophia. She says, "I'm jealous of you. I say it because you can do what I can't." "What's that?" she says. "Fight," I say. So she is jealous that Sophia can express herself so confidently, can take control of her situation, does not let others abuse her. So she thinks you have always been like that. So you have the confidence. I don't have a background like you. So obviously I'm different. It is then Sophia says, and this is Sophia speaking to Sally. All my life I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy. I had to fight my brothers. I had to fight my cousins and uncles. A girl child ain't safe in a family of men. But I never thought I had to fight in my own house. I love Harpo a lot, but I would kill him dead before I let him beat me. So this is an eye-opener for Sally Harris that maybe Sophia has been through a more traumatic childhood than herself. Her brothers, her uncles, her cousins, her father, and the very, very important sentence here is a girl child ain't safe in a family of men. It is almost as if Alice Walker is telling us that this is what happens in my community of Black women. This is what happens. But you have got to rise out of this. So from there, Sophia has come, and now she says, now I'm married to Harpo. I love him a lot. I would do everything for him. But if he starts being aggressive to me, I can also be violent. So I have the power to hit back if required. This is another lesson which Sally learns from a much younger person. Right. So these three role models, Shah Gavare, Nettie, and Sophia, they help Sally not only to appreciate herself physically, her own body, but also to realize her potential. Right. She has been in a place where there was no support system, but maybe the God, the divinity, which she started believing later on, gave her these women who were role models for her. She realized her own potential, and they helped her to celebrate her own womanhood. And from these three women, she realizes that her potential is her worth is self-realized. It is not male inscribed. She does not need the appreciation of a man to realize her own worth. She knows what she is herself. And her attitude of submission and her self-sacrifice, that had originated from her ignorance, lack of confidence, financial constraints, all that she overcomes. So she, after being financially empowered, she gains recognition from society, respect from society. All these were very, very new to her because she has never experienced this in her, before she got married or after she got married. It's only when she walks out that this could have been possible. So in learning from these models, she has also in a way joined the female culture of revolt, maybe not in a violent way, but by showing what she is capable of. She doesn't hit people. She doesn't show her temper. She doesn't break things. She doesn't beat up people. She shows what she is capable of. Her worth is self-realized, as I said, and not male inscribed. So in this way, Sally becomes an active participant in the female discourse. So towards the end of the novel, and I felt that this was a kind of utopian end, everything turns out too good to be true. So towards the end of the novel, after the death of her father, I mean, she realizes that he was actually her stepfather. And I'd like to digress a little bit here. I read somewhere, but I'm not sure of this, that Alice Walker deliberately changed this detail from a father to a stepfather, maybe because she did not want the allegation of incest, right? So to keep the reading public in her mind, to avoid any kind of controversy or stuff, she made it a stepfather, so it would be easier to explain that these things are possible in Black families where women are so badly exploited. Right, okay. So at the end, when father dies, she inherits the family home. And she also inherits a farm and the shop. She has another shop which she opens in town. So remember, like from nothing, now she has empowered herself on all fronts. Now, the nice thing, the good thing about the story and the positive fact, in my opinion, is that even Albert is transformed. And this transformation, the sense of guilt and the repentance that he feels, he expresses this by taking all his saved money. He takes all his saved money, he goes to the immigration office and makes arrangements for Nettie, who is in Africa, and Sally's children, as they had been separated from her at a very young age, as you know. So he goes to the immigration office and arranges for them to come back. So there is a reunion of Sally with her sister, with her children, who will come back to America and from Africa. So from their roots, they come back to mainstream society, Africa to America. So many metaphors working at so many levels, you can see that. So Shag has returned. They live as special friends who have shared a bond of physical, emotional, psychological intimacy. So this is a very, very special friendship which Sally cherishes the most in her life. So I would like to conclude by saying that Alice Walker gives a voice and representation to Black women of the American South. She attacks patriarchal domination within the Black community itself. Racial suppression, as I mentioned at the beginning, is secondary. Racial suppression is secondary to sexual exploitation and marital abuse. So she is not hitting out at the white people, as is always the case. Oh, repression, domination, it's always a white against a black. It is a black man against a black woman. So it is more a question of gender than a question of race. Sally's journey had begun with physical, financial, emotional levels, being deprived of all kinds of support. And now she has a sense of fulfillment on at all these levels. She had written letters to God. She had already embarked on her journey of self-realization. She had not realized it then. She was angry at God that you are also like all the other men in my life. So, but her expression that this is the trauma I am in, this is the abuse I face, all this is she had started expressing in a silent manner. Later on, she proves herself that this is what I am capable of, and you have to give me my due respect and the opportunities I deserve, because I will not take any more nonsense from the male of my community. Right. So she is reborn. It is a rejuvenation. She is reborn, a rebirth as a mature, self-confident entrepreneur who does not need anybody's support, but now she has people who want to be with her. It is out of choice, and it is not out of any kind of force or any other kind of suppression or abuse or anything. The basis is willingness. That is there. Now it is a question of free choice, which was missing earlier. This novel of female self-assertion won Alice Walker the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1983. And why this novel is important, in my opinion, is not only because it is a story of Sally Harris. Okay, Sally Harris here, she has risen from like a phoenix and expressed herself, and now she is somebody to take note of. She is the voice of the unrepresented Black woman. She is universalized. She is representative of all the women who are trying to rise out of their claustrophobic environment. And she had been fighting on so many fronts: color, illiteracy, violence, insecurity, gender, lack of equal opportunities. But in spite of that, in spite of all these challenges, she has been able to move out of it. And this is a sort of, what would you call, a kind of beacon, yes, an inspiration for all the women who are in her position, who are in the position that she was at initially, so that they find enough support from her story that yes, this can be possible. Everybody is worth something. We all have potential to do something. You and I are lucky to have had an education. But does that mean that those who don't have an education are not good for anything? That is exactly what Alice Walker's message is about, that if Sally Harris can do it, any other Black woman from her community is capable of realizing herself. So, and Albert is transformed, as I said, and she does not hold any kind of grudge against him. She is a good person at heart. She knows that she has found her worth. She can move on. She does not have to look back, but she says, let us be friends. So at the end of the novel, we find that she stays, Albert is there, our sister is there, the children is there, the next generation is there. And so this is what Sally Harris has achieved. And hence, in my opinion, this was her narrative of empowerment. Okay, I'd like to end by acknowledging the help that I had. Thank you, Professor Rajoshi Mukherjee, for patiently answering all my questions. I've been troubling you a lot about the technical aspect of this webinar, and you have been extremely helpful. Thank you. Thank you also to my friend Rita Chatterjee of Maharani Kashishori College for facilitating this. I would also like to extend my gratitude to my departmental colleague Tanmay Baghira of the Department of English, Gurudas College. He helped me by sending me certain journals because I did not have access to books. The libraries were not accessible right now. So these contents, they helped me prepare my talk on the color purple. I just hope that students for whom this was meant, this will help you to think further on this novel and the various aspects connected with gender in this novel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shilpa is there. So take over.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for your valuable lecture. And wish we could have some more time, but no option. So thank you once again, ma'am. Thanks a lot. And please stay with me, please. Yes. And now we are going forward to the next step of our webinar, that is the question answer session. And for that, now I am inviting Professor Prosenjit Sarkar to moderate the question answer session. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, Shilpa Madam. Right now, we are going to start our question answer session, and our first question answer session will be with our first speaker, Anuradha Madam, and I have some questions. Those are asked by our departmental professor, Rajoshi Mukherjee sir, and I am just making you the voiceover. Are you hearing me, madam?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So, okay, thank you. So the first question is that, can Draupadi be seen both as a feminine backlash as well as a push from the margin towards the center in the Gramscian sense? I'm just repeating the same question. Can Draupadi be seen both as a feminine backlash as well as a push from the margin towards the center in the Gramscian sense? Have you heard, madam?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So you see, Gramsci had talked about hegemonization. Okay. And Gramsci had said that acceptance of any kind of oppression, I'm not going into Gramsci as a colonizer, but acceptance of any kind of oppression needs a certain willingness, consent. We have also said that there is a clash of opposites, which is a similar, this is a feminist Marxist theory, which had been propounded by not only Spivak, but also most of the feminist theories, that there is a clash of opposites which leads to the emergence of the power of a woman. All right. Now, Draupadi, in that sense, is of course comes into clash with an entire clan of male members, and she alone. I mean, the very fact that Draupadi is pulled from the antechambers down to the assembly, that itself is a mutilation of the status of a queen. And she counters through this clash. She counters the male patriarchy of the Pandava clan and the Kaurava clan. That how could they allow this to happen? Right. So this Marxist clash, of which the feminists talk about, this happens all as in class clashes. Similarly, it also happens in a man-woman conflict, and through this dialectics of conflict between man and the woman, a new identity of a woman emerges, and the man also learns to recognize this identity. So, Draupadi is, of course, a feminine challenge, a feminine question put to the elders of the assembly, that whether it was right to pull her down from the antechambers, down to the assembly itself, by what right also it was done. And at the same time, it is push from margin to the center, in the sense that it is through the clash, through the dialectic clash between two sexes, that the emergence of Draupadi as the true Agni Nari, happens. So in this sense, she is definitely she comes from the marginalized, the oppressed, the suppressed, to the front door, to the front rank of womanhood, and is celebrated even today.
Okay. We have our second question also. That is also asked by Rashida. And the question is seen on the screen. Can you see it, madam?
Can the episode of Oholla in
Yes.
movement?
This is the second question.
Okay. No, I really don't know about the Tevaga movement. I don't have much idea about the Tevaga movement. Aholla, is it about the epical Aholla, or is it about, would you give me some light on Aholla and the Tevaga movement?
Actually, Anuradhadi, Aholla was a symbol of the Tevaga peasant movement in 1947-48. And due to this movement, there was a very famous song also, Ahollama Tomar Santan Janmo Lirola. So the body of the woman was not valorized because she couldn't give birth. And in Draupadi also, I see that the body is the weakness of the woman, and it is also her instrument of protest when she refuses to cover her body in front of the Senanayake. So the feminine body is both her weakness and her strength in this particular story.
Yes.
That is what I'm asking.
Yes. See, both of them are not giving birth to children. That is because Draupadi is a leader. And Aholla is also a member of a revolt peasant movement. All right. With the fact they are not giving birth doesn't mean that they are sacrificing their womanhood. All right. And by not giving birth, they are actually asserting their leadership over the common people, common tribal people, over their own people. But at the same time, for a woman, the body is definitely an object. This is what all the feminists, the French feminists also have continually hammered on throughout, that the woman is the object, and in the patriarchal setup, the male hunger, looks at the woman's body as the object. That is why Draupadi also calls herself as the derisively as the object of search. Okay, but one must also remember that woman can also become can use her body or become a mother in the to be a reproductive mother, and at the same time be a professional. So if you look at the story of Spermidine by the Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, which has been translated as the breast giver, there the character of Joshoda is a professional milk giver to the family of the Haldar family. All right, because so that the Haldar daughters-in-law would not be, would not have to would not have to lose their figures under the European influence, and the mother, that is Joshoda, would be the professional milk giver to the children. They would go on producing, and to be a professional milk giver, Joshoda is also has to reproduce every year. Okay, so the husband of Joshoda, for whom she works, that is Kanali Charun, is lame, and he becomes the professional father. Okay, so here the body of a woman can be used both for reproductive purposes as well as for challenge. But at the same time, the body is definitely instrument of pride for the woman, as it can be used in professional circles as well as it can be used even by a mother for becoming a professional milk giver, as well as it can be used as a heroine, as a tribal leader, as somebody who is a stalwart, who can challenge with equal efficacy the overlordship of the male patriarchy, and thus assert, female, as Shataji was talking about empowerment, assert the concept of female empowerment. Right? So this is how the woman's body should be looked at, not just as an object, but as a figure of empowerment, as a figure of power, which has the power to challenge, which has the power to confront the patriarchal society or oppression.
Thank you, madam, for your lucid explanation. Thank you very much. And right now, I would like to turn to our second speaker, Madam Shati Mukherjee, madam.
Yes.
Hello, madam. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Yes, actually the
Okay.
network is creating problems right now. I'm sorry. Yes, yes. I can hear you.
Okay. Yes. Can you see the screen?
Could you kindly read out the question, please?
Okay. I'm just reading out the question. The question which has been made by our departmental professor Rajeshi Mukherjee. The question is, don't you think that the novel depicts the black male stereotypically? Do you think that the novel depicts the black male stereotypically? That is the first question for you.
Right. Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is a very, very stereotypical thing, I think it is more a question of depicting reality. In the case of these are what the Black women have experienced in their own life. So, but there is some kind of room for change, because Alice Walker shows that Albert transforms at the end also. That if it was a totally stereotypical thing, he would have remained an abusive person right till the end, and there would have split and there would have been no reconciliation at all. So the point that I'm trying to make is, for Alice Walker, a woman, once she empowers herself, need not necessarily become a man hater. Right. So because men are also, so she had nothing against men in general, that if it was a stereotypical thing that a man is a bad person, he will continue remaining a bad person. The father was like that, he was killed off. The husband, there is room for change. So that is also this transformation of the man by the influence of the woman. He can see what his wife is capable of. And then he changes his attitude from that of scorn and humiliation to that of respect and also guilt, repentance. So this, I think there is an area where Alice Walker shows the transformation. He is not a totally flat character. There is room for change. And so it is not totally stereotypical, though major part of the novel is that. Yes.
Okay. The second question, it is a little bit longer. I'm just reading it out, madam. It is also done by Rajesh sir. So the question is, Spielberg's film adaptation of the novel of 1985 won 11 Oscar nominations, yet was awarded none. Was this the rejection of the novel by the American mainstream a reflection the controversies it faced? I'm just repeating it once again. Spielberg's film adaptation of the novel in 1985 won 11 Oscar nominations, yet was awarded none. Was this the rejection of the novel by the American mainstream a reflection of the controversies it faced? Have you heard, madam?
Yes, I think so. Let me answer this. Yes, it was
Yes.
not awarded. There were nominations, right? Let me ask you, and then you can tell me if I've heard it correctly. There were 11 nominations in the film, right? But it was not awarded. And whether this is a reaction of the society against the controversies included in the film. Is that the question? Right? Okay. So, to be very honest, at the beginning, I had not watched the film. So I should not say that what I'm saying is correct. But on assumption that it was not awarded, perhaps the audience or maybe the voters or the people were not as liberated or not as inclusive in their opinions as they are today. So, as I said, there is a subtle hint of the relationship between Shug Avery and Sally Harris. It is hinted in the film. It is not shown as it was seen in the text. Also, the theme of incest was changed, that he was a stepfather. So perhaps if he is abusive, he has the right to abuse his stepdaughter. So these were the things I think Alice Walker deliberately did, and how they were adapted on the screen. I'm sorry, I've not seen the film, but perhaps, yes, I agree with this, that this is a reaction. It was maybe ahead of its time. That is why it is difficult for us to accept things of which we are not yet ready for. So this movie of Alice Walker was ahead of its time because it depicted things as they really were. It is a genre of realism, in my opinion. So this is what she tried to show in her novel without, without upsetting the people who were in power, and that is what she was trying to strike a middle path. That this is the story of women in my community, yet they are rising above it. And she wanted people, more and more people, to know the story of these Black women who have been misrepresented for so long, ignored and misrepresented for so long. So yes, she has had a concession, she has made concessions for her reading public, but yet still the radical parts of her work, which have been depicted in the movie, have perhaps been rejected by the viewers. Yes, I agree with this.
Okay, madam. Thank you very much for your answer. Right now, I have another question that is asked by the assistant professor of Vivekananda College of Alipurduar and Vinod Ghosh. He asked the question. Rashida, I am first asking another question. Thereafter, I am coming with you. Okay. Okay. Vinod Ghosh asked the question that when will the women empowerment seminar will no longer have to be done? That means when the time will come, then the necessity of conducting this kind of webinars will be irrelevant. That is his question.
Yes, I think I would, even when the situation improves, I hope that we still have such seminars and webinars so that we can
Okay.
interchange and exchange our ideas and viewpoints. We all wish all over the world, our country also faces a lot of discrimination, and we have faced it. And this is, as I said, representative of women who are misrepresented all around the world. But in spite of that, when the situation improves, sharing of stories is always important for us. We learn so much more from that. So I would wish that the webinars continue even when the situation improves to a great extent.
Okay, okay. Madam, there is another question that is asked by Shyam Mondal. And the question is, why is the color purple particularly used? Anyway, is it linked to sexuality and marginalization? I'm repeating the question. Why is the color purple particularly used? Anyway, is it linked to sexuality and marginalization? This is the question. Have you heard,
Okay,
madam?
thank you. Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
the color purple. What is the relevance of the color purple, right? Okay.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
You're right. Thank you for the question. It is, of course, relevant to marginality and sexualization because if you realize that purple is the color of dried blood, right? So there is a very, very underlying sense of violence, abuse, torture in the novel. That another aspect of the color purple is that at the same time, and controversially, at the same time, it is also a color which represents power. Because if you, and I have got this from Alice Walker's work, In Search of Our Mother's Garden. So if you could go through this, I'm asking the speaker of this question, you will find a very, very interesting comparison of 1983, In Search of Our Mother's Garden. This is a collection of critical essays by Alice Walker. She has said, she has introduced the word womanism here. We are more familiar with feminism, right? So feminism, she has divided womanism and feminism by saying that the difference between womanism and feminism is as similar to the difference between purple and lavender. So this was a reference to purple that I came across, that lavender is a much faded color, right? Mauve and lavender. So purple is a much more stronger, deep, rich color. So another reference to purple is that in the novel, when you read it thoroughly, you will find that at many times we find Sally Harris, when she has become a designer of her the pants, the slacks, the pants which were worn by both men and women, she is wearing purple slacks, right? So in my opinion, more than marginalization and sexuality, it is also a color of empowerment, that now she is wearing the color which shows that she does not need a support system from the male people, right? And there is also In Search of Our Mother's Garden. Here there is a metaphor that all kinds of flowers can coexist in the garden. The purple flowers, the red flowers, the white flowers, etc. That means everybody has to have equal opportunity and all should have the same kind of care from the gardener. So all the blooms are lovely and beautiful in themselves. So the color purple is a kind of statement made by Alice Walker to show that it is not for a repressed or abused community. It is for a community which is expressing itself. It is a sense of power. From a sense of abuse, they have moved into a sense of self-definition and identification.
Okay, madam. Thank you very much for your answer. And I would like to thank our first speaker, Anuradha madam, as well as our second speaker, you, Dr. Shati Mukherjee madam, for being so kind to us and answering all the questions positively. And right now it is the turn to introduce our veteran teacher for a vote of thanks. Please, it is the time to announce Rajoshida, Mr. Rajoshi Mukherjee, who will give you the vote of thanks. Rajoshida.
First of all, I should like to thank the respected resource persons today, Srimati Anuradha Bosu from Victoria Institution and Dr. Shati Mukherjee from Gurudas College. It has been a most enthralling session. The two very well-researched and well-delivered lectures were a treat for us to listen to, and we have been immensely helped by your scholarship, your insights, and your erudition. So our heartfelt thanks to you for accepting our invitation and for being present on this platform today. I shall also like to thank our respected principal and the chief patron, Dr. S.K. Bose, who has been constantly encouraging us in our efforts. I shall like to thank my departmental colleagues in the Department of English, Professor Dinesh Acharya, the head of the department, Professor Prosenjit Sarkar, the convener of this webinar, Professor Shoikot Sundar Manna, and Professor Shilpa Marik, all of whom have put together a Herculean effort to bring this seminar together. I shall also like to thank the IQAC team members who have constantly worked behind the scenes to make this webinar possible. My heartfelt thanks to the governing body members who have constantly encouraged us. Last but not the least, I shall like to thank all the participants for your very patient hearing. Your presence has been very, very encouraging for us, and it will encourage us in future to organize more such events as we go forward in the discussion, exchange, and permeation of knowledge in these critical times. Once again, thanks to all. Stay safe, stay home. Good night, everybody. Thank you.